Only a couple of years ago, it was hard to imagine Donald Trump starting another war in the Middle East. He and his Vice President JD Vance ran on essentially a pro-peace ticket in 2024, promising to negotiate speedy exits from Gaza and Ukraine and wind down the network of global alliances that Washington once considered sacred. And Trump himself rose to political prominence as a critic of George Bush's neoconservative foreign policy, describing the war in Iraq as a big fat mistake during the 2016 primaries. In this light, it shouldn't come as a total surprise that Trump's decision to go to war with Iran, which already looks quite quagmiry, has provoked a fair bit of backlash from a number of prominent figures within the MAGA movement, including some inside the administration itself. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the intra-MAGA rift over Iran, and whether this could be the issue to break MAGA as a movement. Trump was the world's most influential person on our recent ranking. So in the latest edition of our magazine Too Long, we explain how he retained his top place position, and why that strong result might actually be based on increasingly shaky foundations, as he grapples with unpopularity and divisions within his base. That's just one of 72 pages in the magazine, because as always there's more to Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. So, the first thing to say is that, while there is a divide within certain parts of MAGA over Iran, it's not amongst the rank and file, who are overwhelmingly supportive of Trump's Iran policy. According to an analysis by data journalist Ellie McCown-Dawson, who basically aggregated every Iran-related poll carried out between February the 28th and March the 11th, the war is really quite popular with Republicans. 77% of Republicans apparently approve of Trump's military action in Iran, while just 13% disapprove of it, implying a net approval rating of plus 64, higher than Trump scores on any other policy issue apart from immigration. This is not because old-school neocons in the GOP are outnumbering more MAGA-minded newcomers. In fact, basically every pollster has found that the war is more popular with the MAGA Republicans than non-MAGA Republicans. Nor does this reflect some narrowing of MAGA. In other words, it's not just because fewer Republicans are identifying as MAGA, leaving a small minority of hyper-loyal diehards. In fact, according to the latest YouGov poll, 63% of Republicans and 25% of all voters currently identify as MAGA, a record high, and up from about 50% last year. Now, these polls might come as a bit of a shock to some of our viewers. After all, if MAGA was supposed to be about extricating America from its various foreign policy entanglements, why are MAGA rank and file apparently so supportive of another foreign entanglement, and one that's already looking conspicuously quagmiry? Well, some of this is down to the fact that, while we often think of them as one and the same, MAGA and the isolationists are actually two quite distinct factions within the Republican Party. An analysis by The Economist from last year, for instance, identified 5 tribes within the modern GOP, with the largest being the so-called culture warriors, who account for something like 30% of the party and who could probably be most closely identified with MAGA, and the smallest being the isolationists. The isolationists account for just 10% of the party, and have very different views on foreign policy to other Republicans. Most notably, isolationists staunchly oppose the idea of using troops to protect America's allies, a proposition that's conversely very popular with every other faction in the GOP. But it's also because, even if some of them might have originally been wary of another foreign intervention in the Middle East, MAGA voters, and Republicans more generally, have a habit of changing their minds when Trump changes his. This isn't a dig at Republicans specifically. This happens on both sides of the aisle in the US, in large part because American politics is incredibly polarized, which means Republicans instinctively support whatever Democrats don't, and vice versa. But this phenomenon has become particularly pronounced under Trump, because of the unpredictability of his policy agenda, which has forced some quite sudden changes in Republican opinion. We saw this with both the strikes against Iran last year and with Trump's intervention in Venezuela. Before last year's Iran strikes, for instance, when Trump was signalling his preference for negotiation over military action, just 23% of Republicans thought the US should get involved in the conflict between Israel and Iran. After the strikes, however, 69% of Republicans said they approved of them. Similarly, 3 months before Trump's attempt on Maduro, less than 30% of Republicans said they approved of using military force in Venezuela. Leading up to the operation, that number rose above 50%, before spiking to 74% after it had happened. Tellingly, when asked whether he was worried if his intervention in Venezuela might upset his supposedly non-interventionist base, Trump told NBC, quote, "MAGA is me. MAGA loves everything I do, and I love everything I do too." More recently, a couple of days after the strike against Ayatollah Khamenei, Trump told a journalist, quote, "MAGA is Trump." And while that might sound a little self-aggrandizing, the polling suggests it might also be true. Nonetheless, even if the rank and file aren't yet split, there does seem to be a pretty stark divide amongst what we might call MAGA elites over the war in Iran, and a number of prominent MAGA figures and MAGA-adjacent commentators have been conspicuously critical. Former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, for instance, argued that this is Israel's war, this is not the United States' war. Republican House Representative and former MAGA cheerleader Marjorie Taylor Greene argued that the party was going in the wrong direction and had been hijacked. Joe Rogan, who endorsed Trump at the last election, claimed that many Trump voters felt betrayed by the war. Far-right streamer Nick Fuentes went one further, urging his followers to vote Democrat at the midterms to punish the administration. Even John Bolton, who's not MAGA but who was literally sacked by Trump in his first term for apparently being too keen on military action in Iran, is sounding the alarm, warning about inadequate preparation and holes in the strategy. Figures within the White House have also started not so subtly signalling their discomfort. Last week, Trump's AI czar, David Sacks, went on a podcast and suggested Trump should declare victory and get out. Trump himself admitted that his vice president, J.D. Vance, a renowned isolationist who's been conspicuously quiet for the past 2 weeks, was maybe less enthusiastic at the start of the war than the rest of the administration. And when Vance was asked about his position on the war a couple of days ago, he refused to give a straight answer.
We're in the situation room where you can't even take your iPod in there, or your AirPods, I guess what they're called. You can't take your iPhone in there. You can't take anything in there because it is the most classified space anywhere in the world. And I sit there with Pete Hegseth and General Kane and Marco Rubio and the entire White House team. And the president and I and the entire senior team are talking about the options and about what we need to do and about how we must best protect the American people. I hate to disappoint you, but I'm not going to show up here and in front of God and everybody else tell you exactly what I said in that classified room, partially because I don't want to go to prison. And partially because I think it's important for the President of the United States to be able to talk to his advisors without those advisors running their mouth to the American media.
So, you get the idea. There's clearly a divide amongst MAGA elites over the war in Iran. Whether this sentiment eventually trickles down to the rank and file remains to be seen, and will probably depend on how long the war goes on for, and how loyal the base actually is to Trump himself. But even if, as Trump claims, MAGA is Trump and the base continues to support his war, this could still be bad news for the GOP, because it will give Trump an incentive to continue with a war that's not at all popular with the American public. Polls suggest about 50% of Americans disapprove of Trump's war in Iran, while only about 40% of Americans approve of it, including barely a majority of non-MAGA Republicans and less than 30% of independents. This makes it far less popular than other wars when they first started, and support will probably wane over time, leaving Trump stuck in a costly foreign excursion. As we mentioned earlier, the latest edition of our magazine, Too Long, is out now, which means that if you order a physical edition, it'll be shipped to you immediately, and if you buy a digital edition, it'll land in your inbox straight away. No pre-ordering, no waiting. Plus, if you subscribe while you're there using code SPRING26, you'll get your first copy for as little as £4.99, as well as 20% off every future issue as long as you stay subscribed. One other thing to know is that if you're more of a listener than a reader, which would be fair enough, we are a YouTube channel after all, then this time round we've recorded every article in Too Long, with each of our writers doing their best audiobook impression while narrating their own articles.
The New Age of Empires. Written and read by Georgina Finley.
If you want that, then you can sign up to our new Too Long and TLDR Party bundle. That gets you a copy of the magazine, but also access to TLDR Party, our new subscription. Party members not only get access to the audio versions of every article, they also get access to our documentaries, like our new series Leaders and Losers and our upcoming documentary we're recording in Greenland right now. They get access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, our bonus podcast, The Last Move, their name printed in every issue of our magazine, and more. Find out more about TLDR Party by clicking the link in the description, where you'll also find a link to subscribe to Too Long and our documentaries.